Hello everyone! In this video I'm going to review a new tutorial I've just created, this floral vase design. This is using some features I've not explained before. It's using some basic loft with rails to show how to make the basic shape, the outer shell, and then it's using FollowPath to create the ribbons around kind of the borders. And then it uses some other ways to create this engraved floral design. So let's get started. I hope you will learn something new. It's a relatively short tutorial, just 151 steps. The first 48 steps, I think, is the basic shape loft, and then remaining is the other stuff. Okay, so to get started, I'm creating a cube this time instead of creating a drawing, just because I like copy-paste approach. So I want to show you that approach as well. So I'm basically just going to copy, create a cube and copy top and bottom. And if you select the faces and then you go down to edge mode, you select edges, it automatically selects the edges from the faces you have selected. And then I click copy. Okay, and then I'm inverse selecting and deleting the cube. So basically you have over here 10 steps just to create this. If you would go to drawing, you would have to set up precision to draw straight, and then I would have to, I guess, make the copy, move it up. Probably would be about the same steps, but yeah, I like this copy paste approach. Okay, so now I'm going to go actually use the drawing, and also something interesting. I'm going to go to a spline. And when you think about a spline, you normally think about drawing something not even as a spline, but actually here I'm going to draw a straight line and later adjust it. And the way I'm able to do that is that SelfCAD has this option, you can add control points. So I'm going to add 3 control points, and now I'm simply going to draw straight lines and pressing escape so it finishes the drawing, and then do the same thing for each of them. So I'm drawing down basically just 4 straight lines. It may look like lines, simple lines, and I'm exiting out. So these looks like simple lines, but if I turn on the vertex mode, you'll see we have these extra points. So when I said 3, basically it means it's 3 segments. So you have the first segment, second segment, and third segment. And I'm going to simply select, like this marquee select, all of the top control points, and I'm going to scale them. So I'm scaling them in X, making it to 80, actually making it smaller, and the same thing on Z. So which gives it this line. And this is not like a line, just a straight line. You see it's smooth. And the reason this becomes smooth is because they are splines, so they actually behave like splines. And I'm doing now the same thing at the bottom, but here I'm actually making it bigger. So I'm making it to 120, 120, what did I do? 20, okay. Oh, Z, okay, I did first Z, it goes the order, I forgot. Okay, yeah, actually this worked, I don't know what I just did. Okay, but nevertheless now I deselect them. So if you can see, this is how nice this is. If you would need to draw this would be quite difficult. If you think about, let's say in Fusion 360 or other place, to draw a spline like this, you need to set up a plane perpendicular to this and draw it. It's really difficult. So here what I did is I used this straight lines and simply scaling to move them, and yeah, I think this is really nice. I love it. Okay, so now I'm going to inverse select again to select just the top and bottom, and I'm going to loft them. So by default this is already lofting. It's a basic cube, create a simple cube. But I'm going to go, I want to show you here also, if I hover here, it shows me highlights. And this shows you as 1, and this is 0. So the bottom is 0, and the second is 1. This will be helpful for later. Now I'm going to move to the rail list, and I'm going to add a rail. I'm simply selecting, clicking here, and I'm going to repeat the same thing to selecting all of the 4. Selecting these, and this is what Loft is best at, doing these rails. Now simply creating a bridge connections is actually bridge tools much faster and better for basic things, but things like this is where Loft shines. It has this rails. Okay, so now I'm going to go to settings. Should have probably done the order first settings, but doesn't matter. But I'm going to uncheck fill last. And how do I know what last is? This is what I said before. You looked at it, this is the 1 and the other one is 0, so this is the top. So now I'm basically saying is keep it open. Instead of later deleting it, selecting and deleting it, I'm just not filling it to begin with. Now I'm unchecking the vertices, and we have this. So I just wanted to show you that you can see the inside has nothing. It's a colored from an inside surface because it's not closed and there's no thickness. So I'm going to add thickness, And it's important you see this, the reason I turned this on, so you can actually see when I do positive and negative. Negative means the inside side. Sometimes if something is flipped, you then have to go to flip normals. Loft is kind of like trying to guess, find the best plane, the best way to do it. If you have very complex objects, you may occasionally happen something creates flipped, like the outside looks like the inside, then you go to the tool flip normals. But in most cases, like over here, it detected correctly, but it didn't close it because I chose not to close it. So now in order to close it from the inside instead of coming out, I need to do a negative. So I do a -3. So we fill the inside and now the color changes because it's closed. What this means that the inside and outside, both sides are outside, because the faces that we added from the inside is pointing towards this way. This is the outside from these faces, and this is the outside from the other faces. So now we finalize this, we have a hollow object. So you see we have actually 54 steps. I thought it was less, but this is done, the complete vase as it is. And now we're going to add some interesting stuff. So I'm going to reuse the profiles that I've created, but I need to create a new drawing. I want to show you here something just interesting. I have this object still selected. I don't need to deselect it because I'm going to go to drawing, and if I choose a drawing, you cannot draw onto a mesh. A mesh and a profile, two separate things. So that means that if I'm going to draw a circle, it will automatically uncheck this. So I'm going to reduce the smoothness on the circle just to 16. No need for such a smooth thing. And I'm simply going to draw a circle. Click here and type in 2 and click again to finalize it. Okay, so I have here the circle. I've explained this in another tutorial that while I record the tutorial, I actually used enter mode, but somehow tutorial doesn't support the enter mode, so it gives me the second click. But actually I didn't do that while recording, I just clicked enter. But it's the same idea. Okay, so now once I have this small tiny profile selected, which is the main profile, now I can select the path that I want to follow. And I'm selecting this profile too, this path, which are these that I used for Loft. And reusing the same thing, and I can use FollowPath, extrude, and finalize. So we created this. Now, because they are separate paths, we have 4 separate paths, we actually got 4 separate meshes. So I'm simply going to click Ctrl G to group them. And I can group them because they don't touch each other, so it wouldn't make any issues. Manifold, I don't need to union them, simply group them is fine. And I'm going to give them a different color. Now color is always important before you do stitch and scoop, you'll see later, but that's what I do. Now I need to uncheck this, and I'm going to select again this tiny profile, but now I'm going to select the other profile, which are these tops from the cube that I copied. And I'm going to do the same thing, follow path, extrude. So now I want to show you something. This profile is positioned onto the floor, and the thickness of this, if you remember, my circle was 2. Now a thickness of 2 radius means actually 4. So that's basically size of it is like 4, or a radius of 2, and this goes below because the center from it goes down. So it means it goes down actually a radius of 1 below. And because of that, watch, it's going to push up actually a little bit. Take a look. It moved up. You see, it was initially, while in the tool, it was below the grid a little bit, but SelfCAD does not allow to go below the grid, so it automatically pushed up, and the same thing, it pushed up this way. So these are no longer aligned now. They're not perfectly aligned. So I'm going to fix this soon. First, I'm going to group these two as well, and I'm going to color it. So now I'm going to fix this. I'm going to uncheck this. I'm going to select this profile plus this object, and I'm going to move them up by 2, which is to be exact way it is, because this moved up by 2, as I said. If the radius was 2, then the size was 4, and if it followed in the center, that means it moved up by a size of 2. So I could have moved up the cube, this object, whatever, base object. I could have moved it up before I do this, or I could do it the way I do it now, and I just did it now this way. Okay. But now, despite the fact they are aligned perfectly, it's now on the floor, I mean they're both the same height, it still has these things over here sticks out, and this is simple because this is bigger and this sticks in. So I'm going to clean this up. Now I'm not going to make it like, I could cut this and make it like 100% perfect. That's not my goal. My goal is just to align them so there's no sticking out here. So this is what I'm going to fix now. So I'm going to uncheck the cube and I keep only this selected, and I'm simply going to taper them in. And I don't actually know the exact logic, the size here, I just tested it and that's what it was. So I need to make it a -1 over here and a -1 over here. And oops, what did I do? -1. Okay, and as you can see, this is perfectly inside into this. That's all I care. This should be inside because I'm going to use stitch and scoop to combine them. That will give me the perfect fit. I just wanted to make sure this piece goes inside to this. There's no sticking out. But now I still have a problem with the bottom. The bottom is still sticking out. So what I'm going to do now here is, the reason this worked is because the setting was where the gizmo is. We tapered, the default setting was from the bottom. Now if I taper from the bottom and make this minus over here, meaning is going from here, the opposite side from this is minus. So this would basically go inside, and that's how it worked. But now I'm going to switch, go to the top. So you see the gizmo moves over on top. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make it a +1. So this is the part that I'm actually x to 1. Click enter. What? Oh, z to 1. Okay, I didn't realize. Okay, so I moved both x and z both to 1 now, and I did the same thing. Now I'm actually not sure why this is positive. Actually, I am sure. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm sure. It's nothing to do with the gizmo position. It has to do with the grid. So this is actually interesting. Is if you want to know always positive and negative, you can look at the axes. If it's pointing towards the line going upwards, then you know you go positive. If the opposite, then it's negative. So the y-axis over here, the line goes upwards. So that means going upwards, if I make it by 1, it will go out. If I make it negative, it will go in. When I do it this way, is negative, a positive actually, is pushes it in because that's a negative side. That's the down was negative basically because I'm going the opposite side from the line. So it actually makes sense. Okay, so all I've done now here is I've aligned these, and now we are ready to combine them. So as I said before, I could have grouped everything because they didn't touch anything, but now I need to combine the entire structure, and now grouping is no longer good. We need to actually stitch them together, which is what we're going to use stitch and scoop. And I'm selecting this plus the basic mesh. So we have everything together, and now we do stitch and scoop, simple union to combine them. And that's it, and we finalize. Now, one of the reasons you see how quick this is, because we don't really have, it's a low poly mesh. We don't really have a lot of details. SelfCAD allows you to do low poly modeling, and this is very helpful. Otherwise you could have waited, you know, maybe half a minute or so to combine them. If you have, like in other applications, things like that, you could think about thousands and thousands of, you know, sometimes hundreds of thousands of details. But I made this as a low poly mesh. Okay, so now what we're going to do here is I'm going to go to selection, material selection. Now, I said before that it's important to color before. My goal here is to color the base object. I could have colored it before combining it, but I purposely did it later so I can show you this feature. So I'm going to go now to material selection. You know, you normally see we use face selection, polygon selection. Now I'm going to use material selection. What material selection does, it allows me to select a certain piece. If I click over here, it selects not the black one, only this one, because this is a different material than this one. And this is very powerful when I can select based on colors. And now I'm going to color this. I'm choosing simple this color. And now I'm going to click here to deselect. Actually, I'm switching down to polygon mode. And now I want to select the inside. I could have done it again other way, but before or something, but this is actually showing how you can actually do it. So I'm going to move this to 5, so we have more details. And now I simply can select like this. I simply click, because each of this, they're not a polygon because it's curved, but with the setting of 5, it kind of has a tolerance, which names it a tolerance, to still consider them as a polygon. And I see here I made a mistake. I didn't color the inside. My first test I colored the inside also. I didn't realize the final version didn't do it. So I'm going to color this like this and finalize it, and then deselect and close this out. Okay, so the only mistake here is I didn't color the inside, but I could have selected inside and colored them as well. Okay, so we are done with the basic thing, 107 steps, and that's basically adding the side, you know, kind of the follow path and selection, coloring. Now I'm going to show you something else, how I engraved this thing. So I'm gonna import an SVG, load from tutorial. This SVG actually is something you see over here, it's below the thing, you cannot see it. So I'm going to isolate them. This is an SVG actually that I created from a software that converted an image. So I actually found an image of this, and I used another software to convert them to SVG, and now it's an SVG. Now these SVGs are not perfect for 3D filling. They have often a lot of issues, and you can use SelfCAD's geometry clean. In this case, we need to remove the inner faces. There's too many inner polygons that is not going to be used, or some other issues. There's geometry clean, there's magic fix. Both of them can help us clean up. But I'm using here, and I've used that in other tutorials. There's a tutorial I just recently did for how to draw smooth edges, how to convert an image with smooth edges, something like that, which explained all of these features. For now, I wanted to show another thing, a simple feature, which is, I don't remember a tutorial using it, which is using freehand drawing. So freehand drawing has an interesting, neat option that I can bring in an SVG. And for this way, the way I'm doing it, I'm double clicking on this, which brings it in this profile into the SVG. I can either drag and drop a profile or double click, so it will convert it in place where it's located. And now I'm gonna set also the height, so it gives me a height of 50. The default is always 20 when you finalize freehand drawing, but I'm giving it 50, and I'm finalizing it, and this basically gives me the final mesh. So it takes a little time. Okay, and here you go, you have the final mesh, and look how nicely this is done. So this is basically cleaning it up. You see, this is the profile. It cleaned up actually to remove the inner edges. You see all these inner edges was removed. You get a single polygon out of it, and this is the only way you can actually fill something like this, because it's too complex. And yeah, this is the same feature as you would have had in geometry clean, remove inner faces. In geometry clean, there's an option to remove inner edges or something, whatever name it's called, something like that. But anyways, yeah, I want to show you this option. So now I'm going to color this as well black. Now the reason I'm going to color this black, it doesn't look nice, because this is gonna carry over this color onto the next feature. You'll see in a minute. So I'm going to rotate this by 90 degrees. Now, just an interesting side note, that I actually tried reporting, like I imported this profile, and the software I used actually to convert this made this SVG huge, really big, and it resized my workspace settings. So I resized this before, although not perfect. You can see later I'm gonna resize it again. I didn't realize, but I get the basic idea. So I could have rotated before exporting it and importing it, but when you export an SVG in SelfCAD, there's an option to export an SVG. It will always export on the flat side. So if you export it like this, if you rotate the profile by itself, have it straight up, it will export like a line, because it will project it onto the grid. So in order to, because SVG is a 2D, not a 3D thing. So in order to get an SVG, it needs to be flat. This is something else, like, you know, SelfCAD has something like best plane finding and other tools, but this is not using it. It just keeps it simple and exports. So in order to export, I needed to have it flat on the grid. So just a side note. Okay, so now that we have this mesh over here, I'm going to select the visualize, not select, just make them visible over here so I can see what's going on, and I'm going to align it. So I'm going to go to the align tool, and I'm choosing to align it to this union object, which is automatically named union. It gives me this message, increase workspace size. I'm not sure why it gives it to me. It says don't give it to me again. Okay, and I'm going to align it to the middle of the object. So that's one setting, the middle, and then I want it to align to the front of the object, so it's like this. But the thing here is that if you see, this aligns with the biggest part of the object. That's how you measure an object. It's kind of called a bounding box, and it aligns it to the bounding box of the object, which is over here flat. But I don't want this. I want this to go in, and this is where SelfCAD's offset is very helpful. So I'm going to add an offset of -40 to go in. So if you remember, we offset when I moved the spline. I actually offset it by 20. This part was 20 smaller, this part was 20 bigger. So, but I did 40. Actually didn't need 40, but I wanted to stick in over here because we're going to use stitch and scoop. Okay, so once this is done, I'm actually going to mirror that first, so we get a copy of the other side. I'm choosing the option to create a copy. I'm going to mirror it to the back, and I also need to make an offset by 20. So basically this gives me, as you see, this is the plane in the center, and need to move it by 20, so it sticks out both sides. And now I'm going to, what am I doing here? To deselect this, select both objects. So I'm going to select these two objects, I'm going to group them. Now it's always good to group objects together when they don't touch. If you're going to do stitch and scoop, I'll do stitch and scoop in a second. First let me scale it down. You see it's a little bit too big, so I had to scale it down, and I'm using key proportion, so I can scale it just on one axis and we'll scale everything. And I scaled it a little bit over here, which made sure that it's still sticking in, and outside both sides, and that's fine. Okay, so now I'm going to select this object, and now I'm going to use stitch and scoop. So this is what I started saying, that it's good to group. Why do I have to group it? Because stitch and scoop processes each object separately. And if you're having, like, say, only 3 objects, it will process object 1 against object 2 and object 3. It will take this object against these 2 objects. If I group them together, it will process this group against this. And this behavior works in your favor and against you, depending on the use case. If these 2 objects were touching each other, intersecting each other, it will create non-manifold meshes, because it will process the group as a single object. It wouldn't test self-intersection, where it's called. If an object by itself intersects, it only checks one object against another object. So, but on the other hand, when it works good for you is if I group them together, it's like one object. So now the stitch and scoop only has to consider this group against this, and that's it. So it just makes it faster. This is very helpful when you have a lot of small non-intersecting objects. I always group them together. It just speeds up everything. Okay, so now I'm gonna do this, and I'm checking the option key proportion. Actually, when I recorded this, I didn't check if I can do it here. I first checked the keep subtracted object, so it saves me time. But what I'm doing here is that remove this, and I want to keep this object so I can reuse it later. I'm going to rotate it. So I'm going to finalize it, and now I'm going to uncheck this object, the main, and I'm going simply to rotate this 90 degree along the y-axis, so we get it over to this side. Now I'm selecting again this object, and I'm going to do the same thing to remove, but now I'm not using keep subtracted object because I no longer need it. Okay, so now you're going to see why I needed to have this black color. And this is actually a very detailed object. I could have used simplify to make it faster, but as you see, the more details you have, the longer it takes, because now we have a high poly mesh. Okay, so we're done with the tutorial. The reason I did it black, look at this. The color, the side over here black, because it copied the color from the main object. And this is the beauty of SelfCAD's stitch and scoop. They copy colors and everything else. And you can always change it. If I do material selection, I can kind of use the same material, select this material, which you can see selects everything, and I can change this color. Let's say if I want to make this color, you see it changes everything. So this is where colors help. Very good, very helpful. And that's basically it. That's how you do this, and I hope you learned something new. Let me know in the comments if you want me to show anything else. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.